Welcome back, everybody. This is Dave the Gamer. Today we're going to be looking at the three main specs that all Warlocks are going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the PvP SoulLink and then two PvE specs, mainly for raiding, which is going to be the DS rune and SM rune. Both the last two are pretty similar with a little bit of differences. And I'm going to tell you, how to put your points, where to put them, why you put them there, and in different ways to actually use them specs. But let's jump into this. So as I mentioned, there's three main specs. You do have a fourth spec, Conflag, which is more into the fire tree itself. So if you look at like the Conflag here, it's a pretty good spec for PvP. Lots of burst damage, but pretty dang squishy. And especially if you're looking to raid and everything else, this is probably not the way you want to go because you're not going to be able to go to raid in this spec. Let's start off with the PvP spec, SoulLink. So SoulLink is probably arguably the best overall spec in the game for actually the best PvPer. Definitely rivals like your Shadow Priest is the top, rolling on people's face type of deal. Though it stinks because you can't go to raid in it. But, later on, they are going to need one SoulLink for one of the Nax fights where you get to be the tank. So if you get to be that person, then that's great. You don't have to keep respecking. Sorry, guys. My buddy James here decided he's going to join the video. But so with SoulLink, like I said, it's the best PvP spec. What it's all about is you're getting into the final ability in demonology. So it's 30% reduction in damage, plus you get an additional 10% of master demonology. So 40% reduced damage. This is what I like. You guys don't see because I edit a lot of this out. I'm gonna leave this in. All day I have the cats jumping on me, or I got a new puppy. So these films take a while for me to create, but just wanted to introduce you to my buddy. But it's all focused around the actual damage reduction of SoulLink, which is an ability that you're going to cast on a pet. So you're going to cast this on, usually your Voidwalker who's going to be out. So you get 30% reduction there, all damage. And then an additional 10% from physical damage. So 40% reduction to like warriors and rogues. Pretty much in a BG or PvP scenario, most people aren't even going to mess with you. Once they realize your SoulLink, they're just going to completely leave you alone. One, because you'll just wreck them because you outlast everybody. And two, you're a super tank. So you can do pretty decent damage, but you can take on multiple people. And it's almost in like a BG scenario. You just avoid that person and hope they don't kill you along the way. I leveled as demonology just because I like having some of the things that it does offer. And I'll explain it as I go. So starting off, while I was leveling, you always go into improved corruption and your suppression. So it makes your corruption instant, and suppression is going to help make sure your corruption doesn't get actually, resisted. But I go straight into demonology, so I'm going to go 5 into the embrace, which is going to give you lots more stamina. 2 into improved health stone. You're going to go 3 into the Voidwalker, which helps during leveling because it's going to help with your taunts and not pulling aggro. Plus, it also helps give an additional 30% extra on if you do have to sacrifice. You're going to go into Fell Domination. That's going to reduce the cooldown or the time it takes to actually summon a Voidwalker. Now, this is where you can go a couple different ways. Realistically, when you're full SoulLink build, level 60, all you're doing is PvP, you're not really worried about it's actually using, mana, because it's not doing that much damage. Let's be real. If anything, you want to give it extra health. So, because one technique is someone will, like a rogue will sap you and then kill your Voidwalker. So then you lose the SoulLink ability off it. So you want to make sure your actual Voidwalker or whatever's out has the most health possible. So then you're going to get into Master Summoner, which also reduces the cost and time it takes to actually bring your Voidwalker out. This is where it's kind of some flex points depending on what you're looking to do. So, I mean, some people might give you, while leveling, I would go Fell Intellect because you want to have more mana for more taunts for your Voidwalker. Another way to go, if you didn't want to go Voidwalker, you go Improve Succubus because your Succubus does your best DPS overall. So a lot of times I would switch my pets out depending on the scenario I'm actually doing. But for the sake of this, and because you want to get down to Master Demonology, I would put the 5 points in Unholy Power. And you're really, like I said, you're trying to get down to here. You know, Enslaved's not that big of a deal. So I'd give it a couple extra into the Fell Intellect, which unlocks here. Then you're going to go 5 into Master Demonology. And you need to get 1 more into here, but I need 1 more point. So this is where, my bad. You actually go 1 point into Demonic Sacrifice. There we go. Sorry about that. So I only have 1 point in Fell Intellect. So I have 5 here. Demonic Sacrifice is great if you are just farming in this spec or something like that and you didn't actually go full SoulLink. You can sacrifice your Voidwalker. Gives you 3% health back every 4 seconds. So by the time you make it to the next mob, your health is back. So this is the Demonology part of SoulLink. Now, from here, there's 2 different paths you can go. Like I said, this is mainly a PvP spec, so there's 2 ways. One, you can go Destruction, and mainly using Shadow Burn is like burst damage type of deal. The only downside to that you have to keep in mind is Shadow Burn requires a Soul Shard every time you cast it. Therefore, you're going to be burning through Soul Shards. So it depends on if you're not worried about that. I think this is probably one of the better ways to go. Personally, myself though, I go into Affliction because I want instant corruptions. I want better life taps. From here, I also, I might go 1 or 2 points into Suppression. Actually 3 points unlock the next tree, which isn't bad, especially while farming, and it makes sure you don't resist on anybody. This is where you go into Amplify Curse. I go 5 into, Affliction I think is one of the best overall. I personally love it. This is going to be nice because you can get off, like it reduces your casting time of Shadow Bolts, so you get more Shadow Bolts off. I personally would rather the instant dots, kind of running around, kiting them. I don't want to really stand still as much. The only time I do stand still is why I went into Fell Concentration. This is going to give me a 70% chance to reduce like the pushback when I'm using Drain Life. So I dot people up and drain life them while I'm taking 40% less damage, which is amazing. And then with that, your main thing that you're getting into is your Nightfall. So Nightfall, 4% chance that when you have a Corruption and Drain Life, which both you're casting, that you're going to get a free Shadow Bolt cast. It still costs the mana, but it's a free cast. So that's great. And then I would go into the Reach to be able to make sure you're reaching a lot further, and that would finish it up. This would be the way I go for SoulLink. I think this is, like I said, the best overall spec. You could go into the Destruction. I prefer this overall. Let's look at the next one, which is the next 2 are going to be focused around the Rune Talent, which gives your critical strike bonus an additional 100%. So basically doubles it, which is amazing. I don't think it's quite double, but it's a massive damage increase. So let's wipe out the 2 trees here. Now, the first one I'm going to go over is called DS Rune. So the main ability is the Demonic Sacrifice. This is going to be the best spec right now, or pretty much ever, for when you go to raids and everything else. The main reason is you're going to sacrifice your Succubus, which is going to give you 15% additional damage on your shadow abilities. So with this, and what's nice is you actually do get better health stones. So there's little things, you get more stamina. So kind of like the SoulLink, I'm going to start always with this. Now there's lots of flex points in this because since you're sacrificing your pet, You don't have a pet out, so it doesn't really matter what type of damage or life it has because it's getting sacrificed. So this is where, I go improve Voidwalker. Like I said, this is all flex. You could really put whatever. The only thing I'm really worried about getting is I want the Fell Domination. So if I need to quickly summon one again, I'm able to get 2 there. Like I said, these are all flex points. You have, I think, 8 or 9 flex points. Demonic Sacrifice, that's all you want. Now, this side, the destruction is going to be the same for both builds here. So you're going to go 5 into here, which is going to put a debuff on the target when someone critical strikes. 5 in the Bane, which is going to reduce the cooldown. You're going to go into Shadowburn, which I use Shadowburn a ton during raid encounters. You want to go 5 into the critical strike, which is what you need to even get to this spot. 2 into destructive reach. This is where you kind of have 2 flex points, 2 or 3 flex points. Really, you just need to get down to rune. I prefer to go into Cataclysm because that's going to reduce the mana cost of your Shadow Bolt, and we're kind of like mages, but with Shadow, we're just going to constantly spam it, so it's not a bad option. You could go into Intensity to reduce the pushback, but you're really not doing too much pushback, so I think this is the best way to go overall. And then 1 into Rune. So as you see here, I have 9 points left. You're going to go 5 into Corruption, 2 into Life Tap, and then you have 2 points left that I'm going to put in Suppression. So Suppression isn't as crucial for the fact that it only helps with the hit percent on affliction spells, so like your Corruption. Now, hardcore guilds, there's a lot of times if you are DS Rune, they won't even let you cast Corruption. The big part of Corruption is for the other spec where it's going to proc the Nightfall, the free Shadow Bolts. So you'll find a lot of hardcore raids do not even allow that person to use Corruption. So it's not as much, you're not really worried about the hit at this point. All you're worried about is getting the improved life tap. So let's look at the third build, which is Rune, which is, I'm going to keep all of this the same. You're going to wipe out the Demonology because you don't need that, and you're going all into Affliction. This is where what you're going for is the Shadow Mastery. It ends up being 10% bonus shadow damage. And as I said on the other one, it's 15%. So it's 5% more. I argue a little bit both ways for the fact that the extra Nightfall procs of the extra Shadow Bolts, gives you, almost makes up for that 5% damage difference. The big difference with that, though, is when you use Nightfall, say you have a big crit on a Shadow Bolt and you use another Nightfall right after it. If you double crit, you'll see yourself skyrocket on the threat meter. So there's a lot of times I kind of went overboard with Nightfall, which made me really fall in love with the DS Rune, mainly because it's more controllable damage. Another thing I did forget to mention quickly about the DS Rune build is that's the spec I run around with when I am open world farming, for the fact that I can sacrifice my Void, like I mentioned before, get that 3% extra health. So when I'm farming in the open world, I'll clear a pack of mobs, and by the time I run to the next pack, I'm almost full health again. So it's nice that it always keeps my health full and I can keep life tapping, spend less time drinking. Overall, I find it to be a better actual mob grinding spec. Now this spec here I'm talking about, the SM Rune, this is going to be a great spec for, like I said, raiding, second best arguably, but it's amazing also for PvP. Not as good as SoulLink, but it's a great spec that if you want to go SoulLink, the problem is you'll have to keep spending respec gold every time you want to go to raids, where this spec is good in PvP and you can take it to raid and no one will say anything. With this spec, you're going to have your imp out, which is going to be giving the stamina buff to everybody in the party. So it's a nice little bit. You could actually use your imp to do a little extra damage. So there's little nuances to it. But going down the tree, like I said, 5 in a corruption, 2 in affliction here. This is where you're going to run into, as long as you have the life tap here, I would go more into suppression, for the fact that you are going to be casting corruption a lot more. So this is, you're never going to use Curse of Agony in a raid. It's just not going to happen. If I wanted to use this build as PvP, open world farming, and raid, I would go into Fell Concentration, for the fact that it's reducing the pushback that you're going to get. But for, let's say you're going to go 5 in a suppression here. And this is, you could take more points out of this the more hit gear you get down the road. Warlocks needed 16% right now. Phase 3, we have no hit. So you want every point possible, and this giving you 10%, which is great. So you only need 6% from your gear, which still we can't get just yet. I mean, I think you can with everything from BWL, trinkets, and whatnot. But Curse of the Amplified Curse, it's good for open world farming. You're not going to use it for raiding. I like it, I mean, just to have it overall. Then I would go a little bit into Fell Concentration. Really, I'm just trying to get to the next tier here. So I'm going to go 2 into Nightfall, 2 into the Grim Reach, get a little extra reach on there. This is where I might throw another 1 point here. You need 1 in the Siphon Life. This is where you could finish off. I would finish off the Fell Concentration. And then I would be looking to get Curse of Exhaustion, put 1 point in here, and then finish off here. So this is personally the route I would go for this, for the SM rune, for the fact that it does help you in PvP. You know, if a warrior attacks you, you could amplify the Curse of Exhaustion, slow them down while you're kiting them, but you also have the ability to, you know, face drain tank them. So there's so many little things with the Siphon Life. There's lots of different things for PvP. The big thing is you're getting your Shadow Mastery for the actual damage burst. Same with the runes. So mainly the destruction tree is not going to change. You're really just looking over here to either you want to go more PvP or more mob grinding. Personally, I am on my Warlock. I raid once a week, sometimes twice a week, depending on what we're all doing. DS rune is what I stay in the whole time, and I can still PvP, not as good because I'm already have my Voidwalker sacrificed, where in SM rune, if I'm running around open world, I could have my Voidwalker out, and if someone attacks me, I could sacrifice him for a big bulky shield. So there's 2 ways to look at it. But as always, if you enjoyed this video and other videos I create, make sure you subscribe, hit the like or the little bell icon so it's going to notify you when I do upload. I have tons more content coming out. Maybe you'll even get to meet my other cat in the next video. They seem to love the attention. But as always, guys, thanks again, and game on.